So last Sunday, I invited us into this 2-week Christmas in July series by sharing in my sermon that it is indeed a little bit unserious, kind of silly, to celebrate Christmas at this time of year. But by being a bit unserious about it, having fun together as a community, and gathering our hearts around this story now, apart from the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, we may actually have an opportunity to take Christmas seriously. We can take the promise of the incarnation, the promise of Emmanuel, God with us, very seriously, and let that promise transform our lives as God is so known to do. And if I'm being entirely honest with you, I'm amazed that I was able to stay awake through that sermon last week, because I was still reeling from an incarnational experience of my own. I had just returned from seeing Taylor Swift on the Eras Tour. Now, I know this is a congregation full of diehard Swifties, and you're probably saying, but wait, Pastor Alex, wasn't Taylor in Gelsenkirchen, Germany last week? And I would respond, yes, she was, and so was I. Because see, my wife has been a huge Taylor Swift fan throughout Taylor's entire career, and I really like her a lot. So I've tried for the last year to find a way to get us to the show, to see the largest and most successful concert tour in music history, where Taylor performs 3 hours of music from all of her musical eras, spanning 19 years of songwriting. And it all finally came together. As a present for my wife celebrating her first ever Mother's Day, I was able to cobble together credit card points and some money saved and a few great deals and got us across the ocean. We flew out on a red-eye on Wednesday night, got grounded on the runway in D.C. by East Coast storms, missed our connecting flights in Keflavik, Iceland, had to hop on another airline connecting through Helsinki, Finland, finally got to Dusseldorf, Germany, where we missed our entire rest day planned for the hotel. We had time to crash that night and get a nice brunch in the morning before getting in the rental car driving to the concert on Friday evening, where we sat on the top row of this stadium, scream singing with 60,000 of our new best friends. And we were at the airport by 9 a.m. the next morning, so we could be back in the States by 8 p.m. Saturday in order to pick up our baby from my parents, who was having her first overnighter away from mom and dad, and then coax her to sleep by about 1 a.m. so that I could get up at 5 a.m. to be ready for Sunday morning worship. So I guess a good question here is why? Yeah, no, I don't know that it warrants applause. The better question, I think, is why? Why go through all this trouble to fly to the other side of the world to see a concert? One reason I was able to reassure myself with when I got home, I double-checked before I went to bed the ticket prices for the final U.S. leg of Taylor's tour, and I could not find a ticket in front of the stage in any U.S. venue for less money than the cost of our entire trip. So that was reaffirming. But I think the better answer is that this concert was an incarnational experience. Being there in the flesh was an experience that I can't quite put into words. Seeing all the fun outfits, all the people who were hugging and laughing and crying and singing, having the time of their lives. Seeing moms in tears watching their daughters sing along at the top of their lungs with the world's biggest smile. Seeing a dad and his son walking in together and stopping to take it all in, standing there wearing matching red number 87 Travis Kelce jerseys in honor of Taylor's boyfriend. Getting to see this show with our own eyes, singing along with our own voices lost in this thump of the speakers that shook the stadium, it was incredible. And I know that the entire concert is available on Disney Plus in an incredible cinematic experience, so I could have just gone to this concert from my living room instead of flying to Germany. But you and I both know that's not the same. There is something profoundly powerful, something transformative and life-changing about an in-the-flesh, incarnational experience. And God knows it too. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The story of God's love and faithfulness could have ended right there. The ideation of God, rather than the incarnation. God being the Word, God being this profound idea, a thought, a voice that inspires all of life, God being this bright thought meant to illuminate the darkest moments of our life. It's nice. It's a very Enlightenment way of thinking, conceptualizing the divine. We love stories about the power of ideas and the way that ideas can transform people and communities. It's powerful in its own way, but it's not enough for God. Our God is more than just a pleasant thought. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is John's Christmas story. John telling the story of how God chose to be God with us. God chose to be incarnational rather than conceptual. God chose to be in the flesh and not just in our minds, because we as human beings know the power of experiences in the flesh. We know it's more powerful to be at the concert than to just talk about it. We know it's more delicious to taste the meal rather than watching a video of how the recipe came together. We know all too well through our experiences throughout the pandemic that it is truly beautiful and powerful to hug our neighbors rather than just wave to each other through a Zoom chat. There is something profound about truly experiencing something rather than just thinking about it or being a spectator. That's why we put so much energy and time and thought into making our digital worshiping expression what it is. There's a reason we were running around stressed this morning trying to make sure that the live stream got up and running, and to which I say thank you to our faithful crew in the balcony. We don't just try to stick a camera up in the corner as an afterthought and say, "No, well, good luck." We invested in technology that would allow our digital worshipers to see faces closely, encouraging them to light candles and set aside space for worship intentionally, to make a point of having bread and wine or juice on hand so that we can share in the incarnational experience of the table. We work hard to ensure that this is not a disembodied or conceptual afterthought, but is an integrated and incarnational aspect of worship for all who worship in this sanctuary and from miles away. We know the power of incarnation and life experienced in the flesh. In the months and weeks that led up to the birth of my daughter, I can't tell you how many people told me that this experience will change everything about how I see the world. But they would always say, "I can't describe it to you. You just have to experience it for yourself." And no matter how eloquently I try to describe it in a sermon like this, they were right. That very first moment that I held my daughter in my arms changed the way that I understood my life, the way that I understood love that was shared in my marriage, the way that I understood the love that was felt for this little girl. And it sounds like a super nerdy pastor thing to say, but I stood there in the hospital thinking about how this kind of love I was feeling for her was changing the way I understood the love that God feels for each of us who are called God's children. And I know that there are parents out here who are nodding along because they know that incarnational experience too. It is one of many, not the be-all, end-all, but one of many experiences in life that changes the fabric of who we are because it is incarnational. I can't just describe that love to you today because it's more than an idea. It was in the flesh, and it changed everything. And in each of our hearts, I know we know that experience too. This is how God chooses to love us. In the flesh. This is the hope of Christmas. That again cannot be just contained to a few days in December or even just celebrated in July, but is a promise at the very heart of our faith. As human beings, we can understand incarnation on this fundamental level, but it is often way too easy to consign God to an ideation. It can be so easy to consign God to a thought, when the promise of the incarnation, resurrection, and ascension of Christ all point us back to the enfleshed reality that God is with us. In water, word, and meal, Christ is here in the flesh. In each of you who has been made one body through the love of Christ, Christ is here in the flesh. You are the hands and feet of Christ, and as you have experienced the abundant wellspring of God's grace in this time of worship, as you have felt the incarnational relationship of one who is God with us and gathered around the heart of Christmas once more, you are now being sent to be those hands and feet in this world around you, so that others may come to know this incarnational God. Faith is a gift that was born anew on Christmas in the flesh, not just as an idea. Faith is meant then to be lived in the flesh as well. We aren't called just to think loving thoughts for our neighbors, but to love and serve them in the flesh. We aren't called to say that all are welcome in this place of worship. We are called to welcome people as they are in the flesh. We aren't called to just tolerate our own bodies and the condition of our lives, but are called to see ourselves through God's eyes, loving ourselves as we are in the flesh and blood bodies, that we're not too lowly for God to enter in. God is with you in the flesh. This is an incarnational, serious Christmas kind of faith. In just a few minutes, we'll hear two of my favorite gifts of the Christmas season. One of my all-time favorite hymns, Of the Father's Love Begotten, and my favorite preface to the Eucharist that we have in our liturgical year. Of the Father's love begotten, ere the worlds began to be, he is Alpha and Omega, he the source, the ending, he of the things that are, that have been, and that future years shall see, evermore and evermore. In the wonder and mystery of the Word made flesh, you have opened the eyes of faith to a new and radiant vision of your glory, that beholding the God made visible, we may be drawn to love the God whom we cannot see. There is so much that is mysterious and unknowable about God, so much that we take on faith as we cannot see it with our own eyes. But we have a God made visible. We have a God in the flesh who calls us to live out our faith not just in our minds, but in the flesh as well. So let us love as we have been loved. Let us bear grace as we have been given grace. And let us proclaim the hope of Christmas, not just in December, not just in July, but evermore and evermore. Amen.